okay, well, what about me? When do I get some time with my wife? When do I get some time to go out?
Business.
What about me? Right? It isn't fair. And, however, if we have a look at that's child thinking, right? That's child emotions.
Hey folks, Jason here, your host of The Wealth Faculty. We haven't had a chance to sit down and review for a little while. It's been 13 episodes, 13 guests, and I thought, hey, listen, let's stop and review because we've had some amazing guests so far in the last 13 weeks. Let me quickly recap for you. Kerwin Ray, one of Australia's best business trainers here today. He is personally on my faculty. David Kenny, my accountant, on my faculty. Myself, I didn't interview myself, but Marcus Pearce, the wonderful producer of the Wealth Faculty podcast, interviewed me. Marcus himself is an avid podcaster and has produced podcast 100 Not Out, and also hosts and runs the Wellness Couch podcast network, where there's thousands and thousands of episodes on there. But anyway, I'm getting distracted. Got myself, Trav Bell, the bucket list guy, Guy Lawrence, breathing, connecting body, mind, heart and spirit to the wellness, Kari Sutton, about training yourself, mental fitness, especially for our kids, the itty bitty shitty committee. Get control of that as soon as you can. Had a really awesome conversation with her. Amelia Lee, the undercover architect. We've had Amelia coaching our clients and coming to our network, sharing her wisdom. Anna Rubenstein, Dr. Anna Rubenstein, he is absolutely, solidly one of my faculty members that I rely on, I call on when it comes to the rites of passage for myself and my children. And we had an awesome conversation, probably one of my standouts by a couple of percent, but probably my favorite in this lineup so far. Charlie Arnott talking about regenerative farming. Instead of poisoning the planet and poisoning the land, work with the land to create the right food. Very interesting conversation. I loved that one. It was quite challenging in a good way. Dr. DeMartini completely blew my noodle. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the chat as much as I did. Andy Hoyne about placemaking, about making the world a better place through construction and design and architecture. I think that's pretty important. And Tim Robards just recently from the Robards Method, and he's actually quite a famous actor in Australia and avid property investor. Catch that one when you can, if you haven't already. But gang, I got a chance to sit down with Marcus Pearce, the producer of the show, and we went back and forth about the highlights of these 13 amazing guests. And really, there was some absolute nuggets in there, and we got a chance to discuss them and dive a little bit deeper on some of the things that I learned, and maybe you picked up too along the way in these episodes. So I hope you enjoy this recap, this deeper dive into some of the more interesting points that I thought I learned from these 13 guests. All right, guys, hope you enjoy it. This review episode of the Wealth Faculty. Until we speak again soon, take care. Bye for now.
Marcus Pearce, welcome to the podcast today.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be on with you, Jason Whitson. And I'll tell you what, these review episodes, this is only the second one on the Wealth Faculty. Time kind of got away from us. It's been about 4 months of you constantly interviewing leaders around the globe. And I thought, Jace, we need to integrate all of your wisdom and learning so far into a review episode. So thanks for allowing me to come on and chew your ear off.
It's been amazing. It's been like drinking from a fire hydrant, to be honest. And you were saying we're kind of 15 weeks in, and where did it go? How did we get to 15 episodes done? The world is off and running. It started at an absolute cracking pace this year, and the guests that I've had on have been amazing to talk to, and I've really loved every single one of them. Learned something different from every single one, which is so amazing.
Yeah, you've had a real diversity. So for the listeners and the viewers, the first review episode was episode 13, The Story of Wealth So Far. Since then, you've interviewed Kerwin Ray, David Kenny, your accountant. Myself, Trav Bell on creating your bucket list. Guy Lawrence on stress and breath work and meditation. Kari Sutton on raising resilient children. Amelia Lee on home design and renos. Dr. Anna Rubenstein on rites of passage. Charlie Arnott on regenerating the planet. Dr. John DiMartini on turning setbacks into comebacks. Andy Hoyne on making property beautiful, and Tim Robards on health, wealth, and finding your passion.
What a lineup.
There's a great lineup and a great diversity amongst the guests. Who's been, I don't want you to play favourites, but I actually do want you to. Who has been, since none of these guests are on right now, who has been your favourite from the list or the standout? You're going to have to upset a few here. Who has been your standout conversation from the list I just reeled off?
Listen, I'm gonna say, for me, as a personal standout conversation, my conversation with Dr. Anna Rubenstein really landed for me perfectly. Probably perfect timing for all sorts of reasons. And I believe it's a super important conversation to get out there as well. So that's probably my favourite so far, but only by a smidgen, like only by a couple of points. Because
apologies to every other guest. So what specifically about your conversation with Anna pushed your buttons like no one else?
Well, listen, I have had a passion myself about the journey of young men especially, but again, once I had a daughter, it expanded into young people in general. Our process, our progression through life, and how if it's guided by some great people, or you're left to sort of come up with an interesting way to mature yourself, the difference in the maturation and our kids' lives. So I've been obsessed with that for many, many years. I read a book many years ago when I was at a school called, it was actually called the Sibling Society, talking about a lot of our social aging was like extending past 30, where you used to be an adult and considered someone grown up by the time you were 20. And the age was moving well into 30s and sometimes 40s. People were still living at home. It blew my mind. I left home when I was 16 and 9 months, So for me, one of the things that really stood out with Arna, because I've loved his work for a long time, and prior to that, I was doing some of that type of work when I worked at a boys' school in Sydney. I took kids overseas on adventure trips and tours, climbing mountains, building projects. So it's been part of my DNA forever and a day. So it's probably something that really resonated with me deeply. But the surprise, and it shouldn't have been a surprise, was for me to realize that this rites of passage concept doesn't stop. Just because, and it was a mind blower. So, if we're an infant, we become a child, and there must be some rite of passage that from infant to child, and then from child to young adult or adolescent, from adolescent to young adult, and then from young adult into, let's call it man or woman, and then the one that really sort of resonated for me was this concept of elder, where we might, it's important for us to become elders in our society, not be discarded, and bring those things back into our world. Was really amazing, because I thought of it like, for me, if I think about those rites of passage that I went through, it was leaving home and being independent. That was a rite of passage. Yes. Moving in with my first partner, which ended up being my wife. That's the first person I ever lived with and stayed with. So anyway, but a couple together as single, like without kids, and then a couple with kids, and then a couple without the kids again, and then who are you as an individual when you're 50, 60, 70, 80, and what do you add back? Where do you add some value? So it really blew my noodle. I loved it. I really enjoyed that conversation.
And I think, and I know you said it to Anna in the interview, your dad's and your mum and dad have been living with you for years, and your dad is slowly dying, to be brutal in the way that you've said it. But you've also got the double whammy of Callum, your eldest child, soon to finish year 12, and the potential for him to do what you did when you were 16 years and 9 months, which blows my mind because I lived at home till I was about 24. But I think, like you said, when it hits you in the face, this transition, graduation, progression from one stage of life to the next just becomes so apparent. And I think what you said, which I love, is that you realize that it never stops. And the conversation in your chat with Anna was around, we do live in a society of elder shame. So rites of passage, it is quite, even though we would all probably agree that it's not done very well, most people would agree how important it is for adolescents to grow into responsible young adults so that they can live, to their greatest potential. But there does seem to be a disconnect between once people turn 30 or 40 or 50 or any number with a zero, the self-esteem around that birthday is really quite deplorable, if we're honest. And I think that conversation you had with Anna was a real whoa, okay, there are consequences to that belief system of disempowered aging. And to put my obsession with 7-year cycles on it, you're what? I think you're 48, soon to be 49. Is that right? Or 49. Did you just turn 49?
I just turned 49.
Yeah, so you are in the 7. You've just done 7 cycles of 7. And so Rudolf Steiner, Rudolf Steiner, I think, is of the view that the 4th cycle of 7 at 28 is when your youth ends, and then you become an adult. So 28 in that space. But I have no doubt, I mean, I've spoken to you off air about this a lot, but cycles of 7 years are massive. And you're at the phase of life where, like you said, you are an elder. Like, you're a mentor to so many people. And there's no surprise for me that your podcast is called The Wealth Faculty, and who is in your faculty. And you've just said to me that a big lesson you learned from your most recent interview with Tim Robards, when he was talking about the people in his faculty, DeMartini, his dad, the chiropractor who he's been working with ever since he graduated, his nana.
Yeah, his nan. Yeah.
It's so pivotal. You recognize that to graduate from one stage of life to the next, you need to have a faculty of empowering people.
And also too, Marcus, one of the things that dropped for me is that, yes, 100%, having the right faculty of people around you to support, guide, encourage you at the right times is vitally important. But let's flip this on its head for 5 seconds. For those guys listening in right now, I want to ask a question of you. Whose faculty are you on? All right? Because I believe that's part of why we exist. What are we here for? When you get through those bits that are for you, and there's nothing wrong with having bits for you, getting married, having kids, buying the house, having a career, growing the business, buying your properties, whatever, those things that are for you, be absolutely focused on them 100%. But at some point, it is vitally important that you become somebody's faculty member. Mm. Pass it on, pay it forward. And you know what? And that penny dropped for me, how important that has been for me. It's something that I've always done naturally. And my question for those listening in, who are you being a faculty member for? Who are you? And if you aren't, find someone, offer it. Do it, because the value, the inherent value that you get when you give, there's lots of science on it. Actually, there's heaps around, so good. Isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're saying, and it's really, when I'm hearing you talk, I'm saying it's a game of get versus give, isn't it? You're asking people, are you playing the get game without the give game? Because there's always both sides, and that's really important. But we are in a society of get and not give, and we've got to flip the script. And I love what you're saying, because, and you don't have to be the wise sage. It's not about being, it could be in your community. It could be helping people in need. It could be offering your neighbor to drop the kids to school if you know they're under the pump. It could be anything that just allows you to give to society in a meaningful way. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be John DeMartini to be on someone's faculty, put it that way.
No, exactly. And one of the things we have for many years run a 4-week challenge at the start of the year. And so it's part of sort of mind, body, heart and soul. And one of the parts of the challenge for the soul is to secretly give without telling anyone or being found out, right? And I find some real joy in that stuff, giving, and no one knows. I'm never going to tell, right? And it's just, there's this little gold nuggets. There's these gold nuggets sitting in my soul, going, yeah, I did it because I wanted to, not because I wanted anyone to know about it. It was anonymous, and I continue to do it to this day. It lights me up, So yeah, it's an interesting one.
This is good. And now I would love to just kind of go off script here, but bring this into the world of wealth and finance, because a lot of the, whenever I'm doing a talk and I go, who believes your money can, make you happy? It's always a really good,
it's always a 50-50.
I love it. It's a real taboo topic. And then I share the research of one study of the person that got a $10 gift card to Starbucks, and they could either spend it on themselves, they could either take someone to coffee but not spend it on the guest. They still had to spend it on themselves. They could take the guest and only spend it on the guest and not on themselves. Or they could take the guest and they could do it. I think that's it. I could get it wrong. But anyway, the answer, the most fulfilled person was the person that had a shared experience of giving a coffee to the other person. Now, that wasn't anonymous, but it was really down to the point being that when you give things away, whether it's money or time or energy or love or attention, there's a fulfillment. And I completely agree. Doing a lot of things anonymously is a wonderful thing, but just that very concept of giving, and particularly with wealth, because I know you're very generous financially. I know you just are very, whenever I eat lunch with you, you're always putting over your card, as much as I sometimes try and hip and shoulder you out of the way, but you're just very much like that. But for people that have a great difficulty with that and almost not allowing themselves to be happy enough, a lot of people feel guilty about doing it. Like, what do you say to those that go, oh, like, I don't know how to navigate that? Like, what say you?
It's an interesting one, and it probably comes down to the relationship we have with money, and really whether there's an attitude or a relationship or a belief that there's plenty to go around or there's lack. Like there's this kind of, to win, someone else has to lose, and I get that a lot. Where there's quite a bit of judgment, maybe even sometimes some shame, embarrassment about wanting to be financially well and do well, and you don't tell anyone because you're a big noter, or in Australia, tall poppy syndrome, you're a wanker, whatever that might be. And, and sometimes there is that, that bravado at each end of the scale, a victim or a bit of a show off. But, at the end of the day, what I say with that is if that lands somewhere for you, practice the process of doing something about it and find out what comes up. And I was coaching a fellow many years ago, and he was really stuck on money. He was like afraid of money. Like he was like I'm earning big money now. I'm earning good money, and I'm actually terrified with it. It's freezing me, right?
Wow.
And this can happen. This can happen for many of us. Tony Robbins talks about it all the time. We've got the thermostat of life. Like you're meant to, like you've been at this temperature forever and a day, and when it gets a bit better, you're like, no, let's bring that down, and then you have to overcompensate so it goes the other way, and you're you pump up and down. But so I gave him a challenge to give away a large chunk of his cash that he'd earned. And I said, you've got to do that for the next 6 months because you're holding on so tight. The tighter you hold on, the more that will squeeze through your fingers, you know? It's like cupping water with holding on tight's not good for you no matter what happens, you know?
That's so true. Gee, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
So, yeah. And it worked. It really worked for him because we have an emotional trigger somewhere because of some event in our past, either true or make believe. We usually make shit up, and that triggers us before we can even consciously think about it. And the more you get into that trigger point and trigger yourself and go, well, why? Why is that popping up for me? And then work on it a little. The better off you're going to be. Certainly around money. And I like the idea of, if you earn a couple of bucks and you can take care of your family and take care of those around you, because that's number one thing. And number two, if you've got a little bit left over, then, help someone else. That's, that's the way I roll. So hopefully that makes sense,
There's a lot. We need to do a whole episode, I reckon, just on the power of giving and opening up our worldview beyond like you said, got to look after the family and your local community. But I think,
yes.
Particularly what you guys do at Positive Real Estate and the rest of the Positive companies, there is a really big worldview. And you know what I'm saying? You don't tell enough people about it, but there is a worldview that is, that manifests significant contribution to humanity. And I think all of us have that within us. But socially, it's almost seen as either a luxury item or taboo. Some people feel guilty that they live in a wealthy country like Australia, and how do they deal with that? But I think it's a conversation that definitely needs to be had. I know. I'd love to actually pick your brain on before you interviewed Charlie Arnott. A day or two beforehand, you went down the rabbit hole of Paul Hawken and drawdown, which Charlie references a lot. But I know because I remember seeing, I gave you some research notes for the interview, and then I looked at those notes, and you'd inserted your own screenshots and YouTube links, and you had your own pretty pictures of all of the things that had pricked you. That was talking about more than 100 measures of ways to improve the health of the planet. What did that do, either the episode with Charlie or your research for that episode with Charlie? What did that do for your own worldview and your own life purpose?
It certainly gave me renewed impetus, and not even renewed, like even more than I had already. That double and triple down on the direction that we were going, the thing that we wanted to do. Like you said, along the way, we want to be able to give back in a meaningful way, not only to those around us and our local community, but also a bit bigger as well. And we've chosen to build schools around the world with a partner called Room to Read. We're now on our 17th school. Over 6,500 kids go to school every day. And the majority of those kids going to school now are young women. And one of the things that was really awesome about the drawdown study was that if you take girls' education and educated girls then having family planning choices, because they go hand in hand, a much more educated woman has less children. She has more resources, and she chooses to have a smaller family and take care of less children with her money and her career and choices, which by and large, the knock-on effect of that changes the planet. And that's the number one thing in the drawdown research that will change the planet in a positive way in the future. And I'm like, awesome, that's so good. I didn't know that, and now us at Positive, we've committed to have 100 schools by the end of our next 10-year cycle. So we're at 17. So we've got to up our game. So I'm pumped. It
100
really
schools by 2030.
100 schools by 2031, and or by the end of 2030. that's our goal. And so, we've got some shit to do.
And for those people that are new to this podcast or are curious about Room to Read, episode 7, the interview with John Wood. No, episode
Wood.
8. Sorry, episode 8, John Wood on changing the world, and the book Leaving Microsoft to Change the World. This one here,
all-time heroes.
That's it. One of your all-time heroes. He is
all-time heroes. Yeah,
you love him. I love your story. Your
such
epiphany.
An inspiration person. Like, I love him. Anyway, he's probably number one in my faculty.
There you go. There you go. So I think that was, as I said, there's been a really great diversity of guests on the podcast. I think a theme that has come through that's very, what's the word, relatable for a number of people is the stress response that many people have expressed and endured over the last 12 months. That came through in conversation with Guy Lawrence, who was on episode 18, and Dr. John DeMartini, episode 23. I think it'd be really good, and a number of other people that this conversation came up with, but I do love the button pushing conversation of Dr. John DeMartini calling COVID Saint COVID, because I know a number of people would be like, no, it's devil COVID. How can you say that? Can you share your learnings about stress and the stress response through your conversations with DeMartini, Guy Lawrence, and others so far?
Certainly for me, I noticed, just to reverse up for 2 seconds, after the initial shock of the COVID lockdowns and those actions, our business, our team of 100 people at Positive really came together in an amazing way, and really for a good 9-10 months of the year, all the way through to now and continuing now, we've had an amazing coming together as a team, more than we've ever had before, and the business has flourished, and we've supported our clients more than we've ever supported them before. And we've learnt new skills, and we've been able to reach our clients more often with more information and more support than ever before, because everybody's using Zoom just like you and I right now, and so for me, I certainly was, hey, for me, it's been a gift in a number of ways. I've spent more time at home with my family than I had in over a decade. And that was a theme continuously I heard from many people, which was fantastic. One of the things, though, which was a bit of a reminder, a couple of people peppered in that, that wasn't the exact experience for a lot of other people also. So just a bit of perspective. Sometimes we can either Kerwin Ray, one of my guests, and he's certainly a high member in my faculty as well, a team member. He teaches this emotional pendulum, and if we're way too excited and everything's great, then that's actually a silly place to be emotionally as well. If we're way too negative and everything's rubbish, then that's not a great place to be. But somewhere in the middle is a good litmus test of being able to look both ways. And it was just a good reminder, even though we were having such a fabulous time, in our small neck of the woods, the perspective was that, that wasn't the case for everywhere. However, one of the good things, which you mentioned about Dr. DeMartini pushing people's buttons, he's like saying, well, that's your choice. You choose that, you choose what you do with it. And one of the things I've loved, and I can't remember where I got it from, but it's not mine, but I've been sort of using it for a long time, is saying, well, we're the meaning maker. Something happens, some shit happens, you make up some shit about it, and that's the meaning you put on things in life. Well, like, where did you learn to do that? What tools have you been doing stuff with that? And that Dr. D, he dives deep into that world, and it just completely popped my noodle. It's like, whoa.
I know it did pop your noodle. I love how unforgiving his philosophy and beliefs are. There's the biggest CBF with everything he says. He just has no concern about what you or I think of what he thinks. which is a really, I think it's a very admirable quality that a lot of people struggle to embody for obvious reasons. But I think, like you said, he did bust open a lot of people's views on the last 12 months. I think one thing, I know you were scratching your head, because you really wanted to really delve deep into, almost like DeMartini loves to talk about the cosmology of the universe and talks about all of the different planets and the histories and the this and the that. But I know when you were talking to Guy Lawrence, you enjoyed the analogies that were coming up in conversation around, are we an antenna and how do we actually form these beliefs and where do they come from? Do you want to share in your own words, where your insight or fascination with this lives? Because I know when I see you interview these people, I know it is something that you think about, and it's very much connected to what you just mentioned about the meaning maker. Do you want to share what you think about in that space?
Yeah. And I'll reverse up to it. I remember telling you this story, but books have been a real game changer in my life. Even though education was not, I wasn't highly academic at school. School wasn't my thing. I still loved and love learning through books. And, I read a book. I was actually given a book by my first primary school teacher. He was the first person ever to pay attention. He sort of said, "Jason, what do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "I want to be a fighter pilot." And so he gave me a book on aeroplanes. I still have that book to this day.
What's his name? Give him a shout out.
Shane Urquhart. And one of the things I did do actually is I dedicated a school to him. He was an amazing teacher. But that changed my life. It changed the trajectory of my life. I was just thinking I was going to grow up in a small town. And that theme for me has been a constant companion. The 1% in my life, just changing a trajectory 1% every time I read a book or discover something new has been really what has culminated those books and hundreds and maybe even thousands more I've consumed over the last 30 odd years to really sort of start to ask those questions, not as deeply as Dr. D has, but well, where does this stuff come from? Are we just some blob of blood and bone and bits and pieces, or is there more to it? And it's a good question. It's a big question, and I'm really fascinated to discover what it means to me, and that's part of what drives me. Is like, well, what are we here for? What's the point, Marcus? Is there any point to this stuff? I say to people often, and I say, well, at the end of the day, if you didn't have any money, would you still be you? And the answer is, well, yeah. Money's just a thing that you use to do other things with. And, at the end of the day, we all need to find out for ourselves and kind of tuck away some of these things that we're going to use as foundations for how we behave and who we are. And I'm fascinated to do that for myself. I've always been driven to do it. It's been interesting.
I think that's where you and I meet, because we both enjoy the pondering and contemplation of life's possibilities and uncertain environments. We like to ponder and discuss. You did mention, as you were going along there, the references to blood and bone. And I think a number of times in the episodes that I've worked with you on is the challenges of parenting, the brutal nature of raising children, the tough, it's almost, sometimes we almost don't want to talk about it because for many people it can be so painful. I just said to you the other day, I respect the fact that you've actually read so many books on parenting, raising healthy families, rites of passage, Anna's book, The Making of Men. You showed me a number of other books that are on your bookshelf. You interviewed Kari Sutton, who I think a book is right here.
Raising a Mentally Fit Generation.
Might be somewhere down there. Anyway, now she talked about the itty bitty shitty committee.
I love
And it was a really interesting chat. And I think she really did a great job at explaining that even though parenting can sometimes feel like bloody warfare with our children because we are different stages of life. Our kids are different to us. They're not the same. You realize that very quickly, as a parent. What have you learned, from your guests? And you can highlight Kari from a parenting perspective and the phase of parenting you're at the moment around, what sometimes feels like warfare and what sometimes feels like you're actually on the same team with parents and kids.
Yeah, it's what was coming to mind is like it's brutal. It's a brutal affair, and it's there's a common saying like there's those with kids and those without, and that's the two different sets of people in the world, right? It's an interesting one. It certainly is. There's no off button. There's no pause. There's no get off the merry-go-round. Can I just leave this alone for a month? I'm getting a bit tired. And parenting is relenting and brutal and
unforgiving, relentless. Yeah.
But in there, I think, Marcus, this is my meaning maker coming out, right? So it's like, all right, well, in the times where there is these magic moments where as a parent and you get warm and fuzzy and tears in your eyes and it's tingly and it's amazing, like those very rare moments, right? I think it has to be so brutal and so unforgiving that when those moments show up, they mean more to get you through the brutal, unforgiving moments. You know what I mean? That's my meaning maker coming out anyway. So, but it's certainly one I do see. I certainly struggled with as a young father, the transition from me to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or this was the one I because I took some notes the other day and I just had this rolling around my head. We transition from when we're single individuals, it's about me, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. I'm down with that. Like me, I want to go here. I want this. I want to do that.
But so many people resent it. So many people in their 40s and 50s resent the teenagers and 20s for being so entitled into themselves. I'm like, that's...
You were the same. Like, did you forget? Yeah. So be into yourself totally. The challenge is, I believe, is that we're not taught, or there's no modeling around transitioning from me to us very well in relationships. Now we're together. It's us. We have to learn to accommodate each other in our world together because we're choosing to. How do we learn the usness? And then children come along, and it's we. It's more than just us. It's we. It's extra. And in my head, it was those times. It was those levels, and I certainly was. I certainly had moments where I was pissed off about it. Like, okay, well, what about me? When do I get some time with my wife? When do I get some time to go out?
Business.
What about me? Right? It isn't fair. And, however, if we have a look at that's child thinking, right? That's child emotions.
Yep.
It's
that hasn't graduated to the that's so
still
that's
8 years
important.
old, and your mum's giving someone else attention, and what about me, mum? So emotionally, what's interesting is we're not encouraged or challenged or shown an example, a healthy example in what I see. It's like, Dad, if you've got mum and 2 kids, it's not about you, mate. It's not anymore.
You got to get your head around that. Absolutely.
And now you've got to make that mean something so much more special than it was when it was just you and your mates at the pub. Seriously, you missed that? Come on, check in.
And your boys' weekends away, and your 40th in Vegas.
Come on now, Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with having some fun. I'm just saying we don't have that example, that rite of passage, that progression of thinking, that progression of meaning into that space. Anyway, I don't think I answered your question directly.
No, this is so good because it comes back to everything you said earlier around your conversation with Anna, which was your big one of the season so far, was that passage from child to adult to elder. I feel like if we haven't had parents that have demonstrated this example, if our parents had elder shame and they never encompassed me to us to we, and that was a source of resentment and challenge for them, then the odds are against us that we're going to progress meaningfully through that phase. And, we all need to see a psych about something. And sometimes that's what we need to go and get support for. So
totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, and if we circle back around to close the loop on Carrie, one of the amazing things that I loved about her is like taking this concept of getting to know ourselves, know our mind, the itty bitty shitty committee, this internal dialogue that goes on. The sooner we learn that ourselves, and the sooner we teach our children that the voices in our head are not always right, and to check in on them and to start to understand, why am I feeling negative today? Well, you're a bit tired and you haven't taken care of yourself. Go have a sleep and tomorrow you'll feel better.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you have said this. I've just, and again, when you interviewed me, I spoke about the book that I have written, which is still not yet at the printers, but it is coming out. But one of the
exciting times, Marcus. Come on.
Exciting times. But one of the things that came up when I was writing a passage on optimism versus pessimism, and, can optimism be learned? And Martin Seligman, who is let's call him the guru in this space, but one of the leaders, wrote a great book called Learned Optimism, and another one, Learned Helplessness, was that we have to recognize that a lot of our beliefs are distortions, and we need to dispute what we believe and say to ourselves, which is exactly what you just said. Instead of going, I'm tired, that means that I'm bad and I'm negative and I'm a loser and I can't do it. It's like, no. Like, dispute those negative beliefs. Go, hold on a minute. I haven't slept in days. I've got a young child. I'm struggling to get some sleep. I'm struggling to hold it all together. Like, be kinder to yourself and recognize that. And I think it's so important that you say this, what you just said, Jason, because so many people feel like they are losing at the game of life because they're not measuring up to society or family's expectations or their own expectations that they've put on themselves, where they actually need to dispute their own distorted beliefs to go, hold on a minute, like, get some perspective. And I think that's, and really, when I think about it, that's what a lot of your interviews actually demonstrate, is we need to get perspective on our lives. And, from DeMartini to Tim Robards to Carrie Sutton to everyone else in between, the power of perspective, and you've said it already, like the importance of making meaning in your life, and you're the one that makes the meaning, not the news, not your mum, not your dad, not your kids, not your wife. You're the one that does it. That is like priority one.
Totally. And building that muscle to be able to do that, and that awareness when you know yourself well enough to go, nah, this is not my normal me. This is not my best me. Let's check in on some practical stuff first before I make any meaning of what I'm thinking, right? And just check the practical, and 9 times out of 10, it's the practical stuff that can be rectified, and you'll start feeling better and thinking better too, which is much better,
And this is this is why having a faculty of people around you, and this is what I wanted to say earlier, is so important, because I know for me, 2 people on my faculty is you and another friend, Damien Christoph, and you're both similar ages. One's 47, one's 49, and I'm 39. And so when you've got people on your faculty that are a bit older and wiser, they know when you're not yourself, and they can see if you've got some stinking thinking, and they can pull you up and keep you accountable. And if they're not toxic friendships, they'll actually be empowering to you and go, mate, like, I can see you're not yourself. Like, sounds cliche these days, but are you okay? Do you want to have a chat? Let's go get a coffee. Let's have a chat. Like,
let's do that. Yeah.
And that's just such a simple, that's happened for years. That's happened for millennia. People seeing friends and family going, hold on, you're not quite right here. Let's have a chat. But for some reason, somehow, that has become a luxury item in many people's relationships, and it's not number one, and it's sad in many ways, but.
Yeah, it gets a bit pruned almost, Marcus. It's and certainly, and I was guilty of it. Certainly when things like, okay, our first kids came along, and yeah, you say it all the time. You don't get invited to parties because you got 4 kids under bloody 10. We're not invited to the Pearces, you know, and to be honest, sometimes you don't even want to go to anything anyway because it's like it's way too bloody hard, or you're way too tired, or you're whatever. 2 or 3 kids,
everything.
Yeah. And you get you either choose it or your friends unconsciously stop inviting you. You don't get to go anywhere, and you don't get to talk to anyone. And it's important because that's the thing. One of the things, you know, my wife and I have always been healthy enough in our relationship to identify when we're out of our depth and we ask for help. And we've gone to marriage counselors a number of times to kind of get, we know we love each other. That's not in dispute here. But shit, I am absolutely at my wit's end here. Like I need someone. We need someone to talk to. And you know what's really important, one of the things that I've noticed about that, whether it's you choose your faculty members, great friends, uncles, aunties, colleagues, mentors, a professional counsellor, 9 times out of 10, when I've spoken the thing out loud that I've been playing around in my head for months, weeks, years as my problem, when you speak it out loud, you go, fuck, that was stupid. Like, that doesn't even make sense when you say it out loud, you know?
But saying it out loud is actually the beneficial thing to actually recognize it, because for some reason when we say it to ourselves, we justify it, and we stew over it, and we rationalize it, and we talk about it, and then we just talk it out loud.
Embody it,
to someone that we're paying $200 an hour for, and all of a sudden, you go, hold on a minute. But I think, and you've said this, it may not have been on the podcast, but I know you say it with your team a lot. You know, people may come onto your faculty for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Do you want to share that? Because I know if you haven't said it on air, I know you've said it to me off air. You know, certain people that you've interviewed have been on your faculty or are on your faculty or will be on there forever. Can you share that for the listeners and the viewers, what you mean by that?
That you can always learn and receive some knowledge or a lesson from someone that you cross paths with. And certainly what I've found in business, this is my 22nd year in business now, 18 years in Positive, had a couple of businesses prior to Positive. You have this kind of weaving and flow of time and people and paths crossing in life. And for me, when I step back from, you know, maybe some of the hurts or maybe some of the goods, bads, or indifference, whatever judgment you want to bring to them, every single one of those meetings, whether it was for 2 weeks, 2 years, or some of them now 20 years, have given a gift or a lesson or something in my life. And if I can pay attention and be conscious enough to breathe and ask what is that lesson, brings value. And, you know, the way I've heard it described before, and we use it often, like you said, you know, the universe brings people into your sphere for a reason, a season, and if you're lucky, sometimes a lifetime. And all 3 of those are great for what they are, and identify that and be okay with that. You know, that's a really important thing for me, you know.
I love, as you say that, I have visions of you saying, I love a funnel, and everyone loves a funnel. And now I've got your marketing speak. I think a reason is the top of the funnel. There's a lot of people in the reason, or is it a season? It would be the top of the funnel. Season's probably the top of the funnel.
Reason, season, lifetime.
Yeah,
reason, season.
And then you could argue reason or season is the middle, and then the smallest amount of the lifetime. And like you said, if you're lucky, you get some people, and often talk about siblings are the longest relationship we'll ever have if we're lucky enough to have them. And sadly, in many families, sibling relationships are the ones that go belly up far too often. But like you said, you've got to be really mindful of the ones that are the reason in the season and be very conscious about it, but know that it is like a funnel. And as you get down, there's fewer that you're going to have for a lifetime. And choose wisely and choose consciously and actually do it well, because, the people that you interview on the Wealth Faculty are ones that are doing it wisely and consciously, and we can learn a lot from them. A couple of randoms that I'd love to just share with the listeners that you've experienced in the last 13 or 14 episodes. Tim Robards, as a measure of success for him, it's the smile. How many hours in the day am I smiling? I love that, because I realized when I was listening to the interview, I think I'm a bit too intense and I don't smile enough. So I think that was
Well, make success easy, and I think I've shared this one with you before. And one of the foundations for me is that from where I came from, very humble but very loving community. The things, the houses, the cars, the stuff was pretty, pretty average.
Well, it was secondary. It wasn't the measure of success, was it?
No, and it wasn't. And my nan and pop, they had a house, and it was tin, and there was no lining to the house, and we got to see the rats and the snakes in the roof.
Oh my gosh!
And it was amazing. It was amazing. Yeah, my upbringing there was no lack because we didn't have a fancy house or a flash car, or, I didn't have a brand new push bike until I was 17 and bought it myself. Like that for me, there was no lack there. So, it's an interesting one where that foundation comes from, and it can flow through to, here.
Well, this is the point I think we must conclude this episode on: the true meaning of wealth, because it's a different answer every time. You've just said in your upbringing, money in the bank or the type of house you have or the type of car you drive is not the true meaning of wealth. The answers that have come up for guests in the last 13 or 14 weeks, for DeMartini, it's health. For others, it's time. For others, it's a level of calm, fulfillment or joy. We are still yet to find someone say material wealth is the true meaning of wealth.
Yeah. I think we'll keep looking, Marcus. I'm keen to keep looking, but I think we're slowly drawing a conclusion or a hypothesis or whatever the technical term is. That money is a piece of it along the way, and it doesn't have to be it can be a small part, it can be a large part. You and I both know with our work together, it's an accelerator or a magnifier often of some of these other things that we want: time, health, purpose, whatever that might be. So, it's an interesting one. Let's keep looking. Let's keep digging. I'm keen to find out way more. I think we're just getting started.
No, absolutely. You're 6 months in. It's been a wonderful 26, 27 episodes to date. You've got so much mojo with the Wealth Faculty now. We must tell the listeners who aren't aware that you're also host of the Wealth Coffee Chats podcast, which is a daily podcast. It drops on Facebook every morning. It's live on Facebook at 8 a.m. Queensland time, 9 a.m. for the rest of the East Coast. Figure it out if you're in Perth and South Australia. I can never keep up. But that is every day, Monday to Friday, and that's anywhere between 10 and 30 minutes. So for people that are looking specifically for more financial wealth conversations, tune into Jason on Wealth Coffee Chat. Search for it wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. And by the time this comes out, Jason, it may also be on the Positive Real Estate YouTube channel as well, if people want to catch it through YouTube as well. So well done so far on 6 months of the Wealth Faculty, Jace. We've got a big 6 months ahead of us. And well done on what you've been able to do so far.
Thank you, Marcus Pearce, for joining me and interviewing me and having a chat on the Wealth Faculty today.
My pleasure. Let's do it again.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining us on The Wealth Faculty. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe. Where all good podcasts are found, you can find us there. And if you want to watch it, you can subscribe on YouTube, Positive Mentor TV. And until the next episode, take care. Bye for now.